In this real side experience, I would find myself in the company of Dwayne, Ava, and Jeremy, for indeed we had an intended destination, and were making our way toward it within a car. Dwayne would be at the wheel, Ava beside him, I and Jeremy in the passenger seats behind. On the real side, vehicles tend to represent ideas, for in actuality everything simulated is effected from an idea, and whomever is at the wheel would be the one who had created the idea, all other passengers in agreement then with the idea as created by the driver that the vehicle being driven represents. And so it is prudent to recognize the ideas we are agreeing with, who is driving the vehicles, with Dwayne or the guides at the wheel, so we can be assured we are placing our agreements with ideas that make sense, life and awareness speaking, though we must always exercise discernment, as everything we are presented with on the simulated surface may not be what it literally appears to be. The reptilians are masterful shapeshifters, and with their additional holographic and cloning technologies, it is always prudent to lean to the real awareness impressions. The real awareness that as part of the isness everything, and so is permeating through all consciousness affected form and feature, so every idea that is the affected simulation we experience is available to the real awareness, where any deception, including individuals assuming the outer forms of the guides and Dwayne, can be determined and afforded as impressions to the personal self. So regardless of this experience being symbolic, or if we were simply utilizing this decided method of a point-to-point motion, it is within this car that Dwayne, Ava, Jeremy and myself were heading to our destination. Several instances during our journey would Dwayne halt the vehicle, I would disembark, and as though make some kind of a frequency adjustment to the environment we were in, as though to ensure our objective ultimately would go more smoothly. When each of my momentary frequency adjusting activities were complete, I would catch up with Dwayne's vehicle as they had proceeded on as I went about my business, via teleportation, my body form manifesting back in the passenger seat, and where I would update Dwayne that my frequency alterations had been successful at each stage of my doing so. Finally, we would enter an underground car parking area. Along the route, it was as though I had been assisting in the facilitating of our reaching this termination point through my frequency adjustments, as I said. We all would disembark from the vehicle, which would curiously become as two parts, as though a security measure that prevented it from being stolen perhaps, as only Dwayne could reassemble it, that it become as one and drivable once more. From the underground car park area would a series of stone passageways be ascending. Dwayne would proceed along these as Ava, Jeremy and myself followed. Interestingly, I experienced now what seems a new theme featuring in certain of my real side experiences of late, where I would become as though separated from the groups I am with, but where the experience unfolds in such a way consequently that would prove to be beneficial, as though necessary was it for me to deviate from perhaps the initial idea or intent and find myself in alternative circumstances. For although ultimately we all are determining to recognize the ears, and certain projects and operations are available that present as the best options for participation in regards to the beneficial life and awareness impact they can have, oftentimes the new friends will have their own assignments alongside these. For it has indeed been mentioned that there isn't a single means by which overall the ears can be recognized, each individual as the unique beings that they are, so some methods may be more effective for some than others. Certain assignments or operations more suitable for certain beings according to their developed abilities and skill sets, etc. As I said, I now was separated from DUANE, Ava, and Jeremy. They had proceeded onward with whatever the original idea had been, and as I continued alone, I found the stone passageways now opened up into a vast complex, the first section of which I entered presented as a children's school. I would find no children in attendance, however, just the empty classrooms, and now impressions revealed that I was positioned in fact in the underground bunker I had projected to a month or so ago. For in that astral projection experience, I had found myself in a bunker which in actuality was an alien base of a kind, though with an overlapping simulation filter that had it in the appearance of a human-style bunker that contained nothing but building materials. I would encounter a particular individual in the bunker, which was in actuality an alien base. He would also be an alien body form, though assuming an outer human guise, dressed in military fatigues, and he would present me with a computer code that was of importance in regards to certain of our galactic projects. It was imperative that having retrieved this code, I had to reach another area of the alien base, where whatever contained there would be my next step in regards to the code and its application. Jeremy would feature briefly in that astral projection experience, and gesturing through one of the windows would indicate the building in question. I would warp through the window and fly through the skies towards it. The problem with astral projection is that generally you have a fairly short time window before being returned to the physical body, and so my attempting to reach the key structure would comprise of a series of stages that every time I made it so far back into my body I would find myself, only to project again and progress a little further. However, I would be unable to reach the building before my series of astral jumps concluded. But now, in this recent real side experience, just as it was with the very human-looking in design bunker of materials, which was actually a simulated overlap concealing an alien base, the human-style children's school I was in fact the same alien base, though the concealing filter presented this altogether different simulated overlap. For indeed, we had accessed what was the alien base from underground. Evidently, DUANE, Ava, and Jeremy had a particular objective within it, whereas mine deviated somewhat, as though I was back here again to access the specific structure of the base that I had been unable to during my previous astral projections, and perhaps armed with my code that although my personal self hadn't retained the details regarding This would be afforded by the real awareness at the moment when it was required, when I gained access to the structure I was to find. Unlike the astral projection experience, the recognizing that this was the same alien base would render the overlapping illusory filter of the skull removed, and I would see the base as it actually was. I would enter a few random chambers and find present a number of humans being provided information in a kind of lecture-like setup, individuals also appearing human, presenting whatever they were to their audience. No impressions revealed as to if these were actual humans or other body types assuming such forms, but it seems I had no business within these lecture areas, as further impressions suggested, and would excuse myself for my interruptions. Seemed I wasn't at that moment being challenged as to my presence on the base. I would enter another area that seemed to be for the purposes of providing information to visitors of the alien base, and that which was affording whatever information was required would be a holographic, two-legged reptilian body form, one that sported a cobra-like head. I had the sense of the overlap that would have been present were it not for what was clearly my real awareness providing the actuality of what lay beneath the surface filter, that being a human hologram that was advertising a selection of children's books. Evidently, this was a mechanism of security, that even should the alien base be breached, and impressions revealed it was on the Earth, nothing would be seen other than the simulation overlap, that on my astral projection the base presented as warehouses storing materials, and here, other dimensional real side, as a children's school. I would continue on and pass through a number of sections that were bereft of any contents. I had the strong impression of the presence of the same human military man I had encountered before during my astral projection visit to the base. Very likely an alien too in a disguise, who had afforded me the code. That although the sense was that to engage with him further was unnecessary at this time, I still had the personal self-inclination to want to see him again. He was rather a charismatic character, and perhaps also I would perceive him now in his actual body form, as opposed to the human outer guise he had operated through. Seems I would, however, be denied further contact with him, and would continue on in the direction that impressions suggested would lead me to the structure I needed to find in this alien base. The base comprised of a series of structures separated by dusty, desolate areas, that as I left the series of chambers of the structure I had been in, now I would be traversing one of these open areas to reach the structure I needed to find, that although so distant that it was beyond perceptual range, impressions assured that it was there. As I proceeded, the edges of the stretch of dusty ground I was walking along would narrow, and indeed on either side of it would the ground descend to 30 feet or so below my position. As I looked over the edges, I could see what appeared to be a mine of some kind, and a group of humans, dressed in tattered and dirty rags, were extracting materials from this mine. In this case, impressions revealed that these were indeed humans, those that had been kidnapped from the Earth and brought here to mine whatever material they were. There would be a number of body types, looking similar to the holographic snake being from earlier, sporting lethal-looking metallic whips, and ensuring the humans continue their mining at an efficient pace. There would be no chance for escape either, for each human had a large metal collar attached around their necks, that at any moment, so the snake being enforcers could activate them, and the human would be killed through the explosive charge the collars could produce. Impressions suggested this was overall a Dark Force Earth-stationed alien base, specifically under the control of these reptilian snake beings. It had the illusory overlap technology in place that could conceal its true essence, even if accidentally or purposefully breached, and amongst the many purposes this base served, it seemed where it was placed was in proximity to certain earth materials these snake beings desired, and so capturing humans from the surface and forcing them into labor for the acquisition of the material in the mines seemed a standard, suggesting then that all the human outer forms, other than the enslaved humans, were these snake beings shape-shifted, but that one of them presented as a kind of renegade, the one that had the outer form of a military man. And as I entered this overall Dark Force base during that astral projection, he had taken the opportunity to step up in his own way. Sincere was he to operate in ways that were beneficial, mayhap weary of his Dark Force position, and embracing then of the opportunity of recognizing the ears, to present me with a computer code and directing me to where I needed to go within the base, that this code could be utilized, though no details regarding the code would seemingly be afforded the personal self, until I reached the structure, where presumably the code would serve whatever purpose it did. Impressions suggested DUANE, Ava, and Jeremy were attempting to have the snake beings of the base consider alternative options, as opposed to that which they had been indulging in for the longest time, operating in a destructive of themselves and others' capacities. For the controller types tend to be more so in positions whereas they step up, they can be very influential and instrumental in regards to the galactic projects. They tend to be natural risk-takers and more likely to excel in their awareness processes, or at least move more rapidly with them than, say, your typical slave consciousness-affected body types. And besides, regardless of the choices we have made, the consciousness we have constructed, the real awareness that animates through it all, has the same overall real purpose, that of is recognition, and so we present the opportunity to all, irrespective of how destructive individuals have chosen to be, or how embedded and involved in the Dark Force control systems they are. I would continue on, unable to assist the enslaved humans, as they were presenting no agreements that would allow their extrication. For every simulated situation is effected from the idea agreements we have a consciousness installed. We can only be harmed, enslaved, dominated, or killed if we have the ideas consciousness present in relation to others, that they then can assume these roles we have provided them. We each design our movies and afford the roles others can play, according to the ideas we create or agree to as created by others. We literally have to decide to be enslaved, or this cannot be our experience. And the same principle holds sway for the ability of others to assist or afford rescue efforts, that as much as we might wish to intercede into the created circumstances of others, unless they provide the roles of rescuer as ideas in their consciousness, we cannot feature as the rescue effects. This would be the case here, that although liberating the humans wasn't my primary objective, I would have taken the idea on, but only according to the parameters as set by the agreements of the human slaves could I have operated, and they afforded me nothing to work with. Consequently, even despite my best efforts, I would have been unable to set them free. And so I proceeded, intent to reach the structure where my code was required. Interestingly, I would be challenged and confronted not by some of the snake people, but by a number of large ominous black wolves. For it is so that a constant theme of ill-intended body-type entanglement, recently shared by myself, Jeremy, and others, has taken the form of wolves. That perhaps these are simply the forms certain Dark Force characters assume, or maybe these are werewolves, for the werewolf can present as two varieties, the two-legged and quadruped, and generally they operate in ill-intended capacities. Either way, they were serving as guards of a kind within the sandy, desolate terrains that were present between the alien base structures, and it was necessary that I defend myself accordingly. That I was successful in doing so, revealing that I harboured no agreements in relation to them that they could harm me, and so their efforts proved futile. Amusingly, as though to tease them, I even laid on the ground and presented my neck to them, and although they attempted to tear my throat out, still they seemed unable. They just snapped their jaws aimlessly, as though unable to secure a grasp on my neck, and they flopped and fell over themselves gracelessly. Interestingly, among the wolf guards were a number of smaller Dark Force dogs and also opossums, all of which were body types where the secondary personal self had been established, not simply animal forms directly animated by real awareness that therefore make sense with all life they are connected with. Growing bored of the pitiful efforts of the wolves, dogs, and opossums, I would stand, brush them off as though they were rather inconsequential, and proceeded onwards. They would fall behind, yapping, growling, and snarling in my wake. I would never reach the structure that was my intended destination, but very apparent was it that nothing would or could prevent me from doing so, and perhaps I may be shown more of my purpose at the Dark Force Snake Being's base, and what will come of my utilizing the curious code within the particular structure I sought to reach.